We're all excited about the upcoming Olympic Games, and so are the hackers. Oh my goodness, I just finished reading a report by the Cyber Threat Alliance about what they're expecting to happen at these Olympic Games in Tokyo. The Olympics have always been a huge target when it comes to the bad guys. You might remember there have been abductions at the Olympics before where some of the Olympic competitors were held at gunpoint. Of course, we're not going to forget that one anytime soon. And looking back through the last few Olympics, there have been many different types of attacks, some more successful than others, frankly. But looking at this report, they were talking about the 2008 Beijing Olympics. The attacks then were relatively limited. There were about 12 million cyber alerts per day. Now, this is part of the problem with cybersecurity. You get so many alerts. What do you do? How do you respond? And none of those 12 million cyber alerts per day resulted in a successful attack. Now, that's back in 2008. There were some scams, like ticket scams there always are, but nothing big. The next one was the London Olympics in 2012. And the London Olympics, they had pretty much low-level attacks, and they didn't result in any real high-impact cybersecurity event. And the most significant event back in 2012 was evidence of a credible cyber threat against electrical infrastructure that was, of course, in place for those Olympic Games. There was a distributed denial of service attack on the power systems. Nothing much really happened, no real impact. Then 2016, Rio de Janeiro, they were starting to pay more attention to cybersecurity for very good reasons, frankly. There was a large-scale denial of service attack that was carried out by this botnet. Let me explain what that is. A denial of service attack is where you might have a website, for instance, that's providing service to your customers. They might be going there to look at your catalog, maybe buy some things. It might be a government agency. It might be an important part of the Olympics in this case, and their critical infrastructure. So denying service means you either knock it off the air so people can't get to it, or there's also the distributed denial of service attack. Now, DDoS, or the distributed ones, are where you have hundreds or thousands of computers out on the internet all over the place that are trying to get to maybe the home page, maybe the purchase page. And because they're coming from all over the internet, they're very hard to shut down. And that's where we have the botnets coming into play. Botnets are groups of computers that have been compromised by the hackers. So what they do now is they command, for instance, your home computer that you don't even know is under the control of one of these bad guys. Your home computer now issues a request. Hey, give me the home page of Olympics 2020. And off it'll go dutifully and try and get the home page. Well, that's all well and good if the load on the server is what they're expecting. You've been to sites, right? You hear something mentioned on the radio, and like CraigPeterson.com. Now, because I mentioned my website, CraigPetersonSON.com, and there are people listening, some of you guys are going to go to my website. Now, the normal traffic of having dozens of you people go to my website is not going to bring the site down. However, here's the other side of this. What happens if maybe 2 or 3 times as much traffic as I expect is going to come to the site? I've compensated for that. We should be able to handle that just fine. But what happens if all of a sudden it's 1,000 times what we're expecting, because there's 20, 30, 40,000 computers out there that are trying to get my homepage, or in this case, the Olympics homepage? Obviously, the server is not going to be able to respond, and it's either going to crash or, and I'm sure they set this up the right way, it's going to deliver a message saying the server's overloaded right now, try again a little bit later. And by the way, if you get that message on a website saying, hey, try it in a few minutes, please try it in a few minutes. Don't just hit reload, because that's going to put even more load on that poor little overloaded server. Now, what they had here coming in 2016 at the Rio de Janeiro Olympics was a staggering 540 gigabits per second worth of people requesting home pages. That is insane. That is a lot of bandwidth. And the fact that they apparently had that much bandwidth available coming in is also amazing. But also remember, people are looking at videos. They might have signed up to get the insider scoop, have some stuff happening behind the scenes. Now, many of the attacks in 2016 started before the Olympic Games even started. And what they were doing is attacking different parts of the Olympics infrastructure operationally. So it's a problem. It's a very big problem. They survived that whole thing. And by the way, the Brazilian government ended up trying to protect the World Cup back in 2014 as well, by spending a whole lot of money and time on this. But remember, even back in 2008, we were talking about 12 million cyber alerts per day. How can you staff up for that? That was back then. We're seeing some of our clients being hit with hundreds of cyber attacks a minute and multiple per second, sometimes 10, 20, 30 per second. It's just incredible what happens. In fact, divide those numbers out. 12 million divided by how many seconds in a day. It just shows you how amazingly huge it is. Now, we have seen times in the past where a country like North Korea, for instance, doesn't like what Sony Pictures is doing. So North Korea then attacks Sony Pictures. And in the case of Sony, they downloaded a bunch of confidential information. They released it. They embarrassed some people. Hardly anybody got fired. It's absolutely amazing. But anyways, what's happening right now is Russia. Think about all of the Russian attacks against our businesses and our critical infrastructure as a country. They have been huge, massive attacks. We have now Russia at a point where they are getting massive amounts of angst built up. Why? Because they submitted doped samples in 2019 to the Olympic committees. Yeah, so this was the McLaren reports released by the World Anti-Doping Agency and described what were really systematic efforts by the Russian government to really undermine the drug testing process. We've also seen the Russians in the past, because they've been caught doing this, and the Chinese as well, putting in some of the competitors, particularly into things like gymnastics, that were too young to compete based on the Olympic rules that were in place. So we had all of this happen during and after the 2014 Sochi Winter Olympics. Guess what? Those restrictions on their athletes are still in place, and in place in a very big way. They will not play the Russian national anthem at the ceremonies at the Olympics, and they will not allow the Russian flag to be carried. In fact, their athletes have to carry a neutral flag. So expect some serious attacks from Russia against the Olympics. And remember, the Olympics, there are no spectators. Everybody's going to be watching this thing online. So it's going to be interesting. We'll keep an eye and let you know how things go. Stick around and visit me online, craigpeterson.com.